Hi everyone, Phil here, welcome back to my garden. Today I'm going to give you a tour of my garden because I realize it's been a while since I've shown something up to date. Most of my videos are filmed in advance, so you don't really see what my garden looks like right now. So I'm going to give you a quick garden tour, and I'll finish with a quick tip on how to tell if your eggplants are ripe. So keep watching. Now, if you remember my video on how to start lettuce in a container, so this is what it looks like right now. As you can see, it's pretty big. I'll need to start picking some leaves here and there to actually use it. Here you have my spinach from New Zealand. They look a bit small because I picked the bigger leaves yesterday, so they still have to regrow a bit. There's some green onions there. They're starting to look good. This is my Grand Rapids lettuce. This one is starting to be almost ready for another picking, but it's also rearing the end of its life, from what I can tell. It's starting to be a bit taller, so I'm thinking it's going to go to seed at some point. Here you can see more of those spinach. Those I haven't actually picked yet, well, not this batch, the back part I did. You can tell they get pretty big, so you get a lot of food from those. I really like them. I have this one lettuce right there, and I have some grass growing in there, so I'll have to pick that. There you go. Okay, more Grand Rapids. Oh, this is the same kind of lettuce that I have in the container. Well, this one's an oak leaf. You can tell it's getting pretty good. I'll need to start picking this one soon. There I have spinach. This is a rutabaga. You can tell it's starting to grow pretty big, and you can tell the base there is starting to change color. So that's where the actual rutabaga is. These are supposed to be root vegetables, but quite honestly, it's not really a root. It's more of the base enlarging and becoming bigger. It's a bit like kohlrabi if you've ever grown those. They're the same principle. Oh, look at that one. That's the outrageous red lettuce. Looks awesome. It's a very nice red color. And right next to it is this huge amount of Grand Rapids lettuce. I really need to start picking that one. It's getting pretty big. My bunnies will have so much food from that. There are some radishes. They're starting to do well. Some of them have formed a little tuber there. So I'll be able to start picking them soon. Those are rapinis. They start producing pretty well, especially after they got treated to get rid of those bugs. There's still some in there, but it's really not as bad as it used to be. Honestly, not a big fan of those. They're really bitter. And yeah, eaten raw like that, the flowerets are not that bad. But once they get cooked, it's so bitter. It's, not my strong suit. Oh, there we have collard greens. They're essentially a kind of a cabbage. It basically doesn't form a head, but aside from that, it's cabbage leaves. They've already been picked before. I made borscht with that. That was really good. Here we have a lot of rutabaga. Oh, and you can tell this one, I don't know if I can actually show you. You see how big this one is? This is looking really good. And there, I have a surprise growing in there. You see this plant there that looks a bit like parsley, but it's chervil. I didn't even remember planting it. Apparently I did, and forgot about it because it didn't sprout. But turns out it grew pretty well. I have some leeks in there. They're doing okay. What I hope is that they'll grow a lot bigger once the rutabaga are out. So now for the next garden bed. Oh, and this is my rhubarb. It looks awesome. There, I have more of those watermelon radishes. They'll need to be picked soon, but they weren't big enough for me yet. And look at those tomatoes. See the size of this one? It's bigger than my hand. And oh, look at this tomato plant. It's hard to tell, but that thing is almost 8 feet tall. I have some dwarf Scotch kale here. It's growing well. That's thyme with some weeds growing in there. Well, more. Those are basil plants. That's a carrot. So I originally had carrots planted in there. That's one of the only ones that sprouted. It was not a great year for carrots. And look at the amount of tomatoes in that plant. It's looking pretty good. This one is some kind of Italian tomato. It's called Monica. I have this one plant of cilantro growing there. It's the only one I've ever been able to grow. I know, it's pretty sad. These are green onions I just planted recently. Actually, if you remember that video where I planted the seeds with my daughter, well, those are the green onions that came out of that. So here's a follow-up video on those. I have, oh, look at that. This is red Russian kale. It looks awesome. It's really big. I didn't even think it would be growing. I started planting those early in the season. Didn't see anything sprout, so I just figured, oh well, they were duds, so I wouldn't get any. But nope, they're growing really well, and I've already picked from them. So these are really good. Honestly, red Russian kale, this stuff will survive winter. So those are good to grow. Here at the base, it's oregano. Here I have lemon basil. This weird looking plant there, that's lacinato kale. It's like longer leaves, narrower. They look good. I have, those are cucumbers. They're really getting big and nice. And you see there's already some cucumbers starting to form there. So this is looking pretty good. I think I'm gonna get a good harvest out of those. Now, to keep going, so here I used to have my peas, now I have beans. I will actually regrow some peas in there. I already have some started there. But for now, I pulled whatever was there because it was pretty much done. That's a hard thing for gardeners, getting rid of plants that are done producing. It's always heartbreaking. And more of that Grand Rapids. I have a ton of that lettuce, honestly. My bunnies really enjoy it. But they're also starting to get close to go to seeds. I think I still have a few weeks left on that. Good thing I started more. While I'm there, here you can see these are royal burgundy beans. They look really cool. So hopefully I'll get a lot of those. I already started more seeds, so I should get a good harvest from that. And that's my basil. I think this one is sweet basil, and in the other row that's Genovese basil. And then we're getting to the eggplants. This one is having a bit of problem getting fruits. It seems that the branch keep breaking every time. But this one right there, look at that. Look how awesome. And keep in mind, this is miniature eggplant. So they won't get as big as a regular one. And you see, this one is pretty much done from what I can tell. The trick is you press it down, and if it doesn't come back up, you know it's ready. You want them to be slightly underripe. Otherwise, they might get a bit bitter. Although this kind is supposed to not be bitter, but you know, It might get anyway. So this is looking pretty good. I'm very happy with this plant. And this kind is called Mini Hansel. So if you ever get your hands on that, it seems to be a very good grower. Very happy with this purchase. This is not one I grew from seed, obviously. So this one works well. I've already picked one. It tastes very good. Now in there I have more of that Grand Rapids lettuce that I have a ton of, and these spinach, a ton of those, as well as some rutabaga in there and some green onions. They're getting a bit overcrowded there, but well, actually onions tend to grow slim, so they're fine in there. So that's what it looks like for this one. And then finally, this is my potato bed. They're all falling over, and that's normal. It's supposed to be like that. Once they start falling over, it means they're pretty much ready. I'm going to give them about a week and a half maybe before I start pulling more of them, because I already picked some of the smaller plants and there was not much potatoes in there, so I'm hoping that maybe they're not completely ready. And there you can tell I have all of that lettuce that I threw in there. That was just essentially tossing whatever was left in my packet to see what would grow, as well as tossing a bit of dill that I used to season my borscht that I made. So this is growing really well for something that I just threw in there. I'll need to start picking them though, because they're starting to go to seed. You can tell this one there, that's how you can tell they're growing to seed. So this one's starting to bolt. I think I'll have to pull the whole plant at that point. It's not really worth trying to rescue it. It's going to seed, so it's at the end of its life. But that was just to take space and use the rest of my seeds, because this whole bed was weeds when I started working with it. So anyway, that's pretty much it for this tour of the garden. Actually, one last thing. These there are marigolds. I didn't think they would be growing that tall. The other marigolds that I have in containers got maybe a third of that size, so I'm a bit surprised. And there I have more kale. It's always good to have. I have some basil. I honestly have basil pretty much everywhere. More cucumbers, same kind as in the other garden. I have some carrots growing in there, actually. It's one of the only places where it grew. I think we had a very dry season and carrots had trouble starting. And that is more collard greens. As you can tell, they got pretty good even though they were almost completely eaten by bugs. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for more gardening videos. Ciao guys!